In this one, we're going to be talking about Ajax. Ajax is asynchronous JavaScript and XML. But what that means is when we use Ajax, we can do data passing without refreshing the page. That means like when I click on water bottle here, it actually refreshes the page. It requests a new page and gets a response for that page. When I add something to the cart, it does the same thing. It requests a new page and it gets a response back from the page. It's a very known cycle, and that's called asynchronous. That's using synchronicity. It's one thing happens, another thing's returned. Now what Ajax does is it does those things in the back end. It's called asynchronous. So that means if I click this button, the page will not actually reload. Instead, it will stay in the same exact spot, but data will still go back to the server and come back and actually allow us to work with that data without refreshing the page whatsoever, which provides a very nice user experience. And we'll see what that means in just a second. But if you want to see what requests look like, go to any web page and just hit refresh. When you see that loading up there, that typically means that it's being a synchronous actual loading. It's not going to do that necessarily with Ajax because the web browsers don't always follow what the Ajax's requests are doing. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But more than likely, if you click on a link and it goes to a different URL, it's more than likely going to be a new request. Now, there are other frameworks that do Ajax that change even the URL, which is really cool, but it's not something we're going to cover right now. It's more of how to actually add it to the cart by just clicking the button and actually not redirecting to the cart and not doing anything there. So that's what we're going to do. So jumping into our product detail, this is where we're going to do our first Ajax call, which is add to cart. So before we actually even get started with the JavaScript stuff, we need to come down and give some IDs to our form as well as our submit button. So first off, I'll just say ID equals to add dash form, and then the input I'll give ID equals submit btn. All right, so now up into our jQuery here, we're going to use the $ to grab the submit button. So it's submit btn. And so this is the selector for getting that submit button. So we can use all sorts of actions on here. It's the submit button right here. And you just want to make sure that the IDs are the same. So submit button is the same as this. And then you just put a hash or a period depending on if it's ID or class. And like what we've seen before is there's this .change function, but there's also a .click function. So if it's clicked, then we can do stuff with it. And we just add in a function in here. And this is a function handler. So this is actually handling the event that's called submit or click on the submit button. And so since it's a handler, we can also pass in a few arguments in here. One of them being event, so the actual act of this happening. So if we did event.prevent default, what this does is it prevents the default action with whatever this element is. So in this case, the default action of a submit button is to submit the form, right? It's to actually send it. Now, if this was a anchor tag, so like this share button, we could also have a prevent default on there, and it just wouldn't go to the hyperlink reference. Where us, right here, we're just preventing it from submitting the actual form. So instead, I'm just going to console log the form data. And to get the form data, a very easy way to do it is, first off, I'll set var form data using camel case. That's the JSON, or excuse me, that's the JavaScript. That's the JavaScript formatting for any variable. Instead of Python formatting would be form underscore data. Instead, we use camel case here. And we're going to grab the ID of add-form, which we set right here. And then we're just going to do serialize. So this is going to serialize the form data that's actually coming through here, which we'll see in just a second. So I'll do console log form data. And we can put semicolons at the end of these. The browsers are smart enough now that they don't actually need those semicolons anymore, but that's best practice to have the semicolon at the end. All right, so now let's go and take a look at this. If I hit add to cart, nothing happens. Well, that's the prevent default in action. It's actually preventing it from doing what it needs to do. So if I go into inspect element here, go into console, I now see that there's this form data. So we've got item 5, quantity of 1. If I change the quantity and hit add to cart, notice the page does not refresh, nothing happens, but something in the console says item 5, quantity 5. Cool. So that means we can actually send that data on to our actual form. Now before we do that, I actually want to show you how you could just console log this stuff and then submit it anyway. So do the default action that's supposed to happen, which this prevents, which is really simple. We are just going to have the form be submitted. So we'll just grab the form itself, add form, and then .submit. And that actually submits the form. So if we refresh in here and click add to cart, it doesn't really prevent anything from happening. It does actually console log the data, but that's not really that important. We'll comment this out for now and leave it for later, just so if there's any errors that happen, we can still have this data actually come through. So now what we want to do is actually do an Ajax call. And to do Ajax, we use $.Ajax, and inside of Ajax, we use these curly brackets, so parentheses, curly brackets. And the first thing we do is type and the actual method that we're going to be using. In this case, it's get. If we were using post data, we would need to do something else, which I'll show you in just a second. And then URL equals to the URL we want to use, which is our URL of cart, right? Because we're sending the cart data, just like what we did down here. It's the same action. So this is a URL that you're going to be sending this data to. Now keep in mind, this URL does not have to be a form, right? It doesn't have to be a form action, or how Ajax works also does not have to be a form. All right, so then we can just send our data. So whatever sort of data that we want to send with this, we would say data. And we're going to set that equal to form data. So that's this form data here. And then we're going to do a few things. We'll do success. So if it's a successful action, we're going to handle it with a function called, and it's going to take in data, and then we'll just console log that data. And then we'll also have an error handler with a function, and it's going to take in the response as well as the error. So response, error, and we'll just console log those two, response and error. Oops. Cool. So now that we have the Ajax call actually set up, we need to set up our URL to handle this Ajax call. So back into our views, in our our view for the cart, that is, so cart views, inside of cart view, our get function, this is where we're going to handle it. And we want to check, so we'll say, right underneath cart, I'll just say if request.isAjax. So if the request is an Ajax request, then this is where we're going to handle it. And we'll print out request.get item. I want to see what that actually is. And then we're going to return a dictionary. And I'll just say success equals to true. And this dictionary is great as Python dictionaries are concerned, but it's not a JSON dictionary, which is actually what we need. So we need to return a JSON response, which we can import from HTTP JSON response. And that actually might not be the right one, so let's look into the response request. And JSON response is actually just uppercase, so JSON response right here. And what this is going to do is we can wrap this dictionary into JSON response, and that will turn it into JSON object that we can actually work with, which we'll see once we actually add it because of this. So that's the data that's coming back is from the response itself. All right, so let's check it out. Now, if we go into our home page, we're going to go to add to cart, and we've got an unexpected token on 300. Oops, that's the form data. This should be a comma because it is a dictionary here. So that should be a comma, not a semicolon there. So we refresh and we go add to cart, and we've got console. We have an external error here, and I'll say cart global name item is not generated by the handler. So let's actually take a look at our view itself. So item, that we need to put that into quotes. There we go. So that was the problem. So refresh, add to cart, and we've got quantity being 5 and item being 5 and quantity being 1. Go into the terminal and we see 5. So the item stuff actually does come through still. So that also means that if the request is working correctly for Ajax, we really just need to worry about the response that we give. So let's go ahead and cut this. And I'm going to paste it down below everything, because if this is still working, request.get, then it should work all the way through. Right? So if the delete is in there, then delete again. All of it should still work. So we come back in here, and now what we want to do is all I'm going to say here is if the item is deleted, so deleted equals to is deleted, or excuse me, delete item. And now if we actually added it to the cart, we're going to change this and say put created here. So this is getting get or created. If it's created, we'll say item added equals to true. And we're going to put this in our response too. So all we're doing here is saying deleted or added. And if it's added or deleted or both, then it's going to return that in a way that works out for us. So let's go back in here and refresh. And we'll change the quantity to 4. And we're getting an error code. Item is generated by local variable item. So item added, we want to say item added equals to false. Because if it's not created, we want to make sure that item added is still coming through. Refresh in here. Add to cart. Deleted is null, and item added is false. So I'm also going to put deleted item. We could say the default is going to be none, or actually false. So the default for deleted item is false. The default for item added is false. I'll put that right up there too. So now if the item is not in the cart and it's added, then true will come through. So we refresh in here again, add it, and I see deleted being false, item added being false. And if I do this, 5, deleted false, item added is false. But we didn't see if it was updated at all, which is kind of assumed if it's not added, right? If it's not added and it's not deleted, then it should be considered updated. So that's something to note as well. That's what I'm going to go off of. Okay, so now that we have this, let's go back into our product detail. And this is actually where we'll have to update some stuff. But before I do that, I'm going to go into a different page, so MP3 player. And this should not be in our cart. If we go into console, hit add to cart, we've got item added, true, deleted, false. And then if I update, there we go, item added, false, deleted, false. If I put it to 0 or negative, deleted, true, item added, false. Cool. All right, so now that we've got this, let's go back in here, and all I'm going to do is give some sort of message with this console data. So down in above the form, I'm going to say p class equals to lead, and I'm just going to put a message here, and I'll give it an ID of jQuery message, and we're going to grab this message, and inside of here, I'm going to put the message, and I'll put text here and say what the text I want it to be. So I can put if it's added, so I'll say added, and then plus data.item underscore added, I believe is what we called it. Inspect element, console. Actually, let's look at the view. Item underscore added is what we called it. So we'll do item added, and then plus space, and we'll say deleted plus data.deleted. in the views. There we go. And then finally, if we have an error with the Ajax, I'm just going to submit the form as usual and just go off of that. So this is just going to run the form like it normally would. So if I refresh in here, add to cart, item added, true, deleted, false. Perfect. Add to cart, added false, deleted false. Again, very good. All right, so if you have any questions on this, let us know. We are going to update our message in the near future. As of now, we're just going to leave it like this. But we also want to do something just like this on our cart. All right, so if you have any questions, again, let us know. Otherwise, let's keep going.